This week on Quality Digest Live, what Deming's 14 points have to say about innovation. And also, we're going to talk to John Zeigert of the University of North Carolina, Charlotte about the Precision Path Consortium and some work being done at UNC Charlotte, both of which contribute to helping U.S. manufacturing. That and a whole bunch more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is brought to you by Mitutoyo America. Whatever your metrology challenges, Mitutoyo supports you from start to finish.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for August 26, 2016. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief for Quality Digest, and Mike Ridgman is on vacation somewhere in Colorado, and we hope to see him back next week. Really, seriously. Okay, I am a museum geek. I love museums, any kind of museum, art museums, natural history museums, historical museums, doll museums. Yes, doll museums. I love them. I mean, there's something, I guess, not only about looking at art or history or whatever purely for the content, but there's also something about the museum experience itself, how it's put together, how the physical space and the surroundings, in a good museum anyway, lead you into the subject, how they immerse you in the subject. And that is why I was really intrigued by the article from Francois Leclerc of Creaform called Reviving King Tutankhamun with 3D Scanning. The article describes how a Creaform color 3D scanner was used to scan historical artifacts and reproductions at the Milwaukee Public Museum, also known as the MPM, so that people could take a closer look at these objects on a tablet or their smartphone or a computer. In other words, extending the physical museum experience into a virtual experience as well. So in the article, Leclerc describes how they scanned a full-size model, a reproduction, of a young King Tut riding his chariot. And the model is part of the Crossroads of Civilization exhibit at the MPM. You can see them scanning it right there. The reproduction of King Tut riding a chariot pulled by two horses, full size, by the way, is by itself magnificent. I mean, it is an awesome piece of work by the artists at the MPM. So obviously, it itself being kind of a work of art, they can't let the museum guests touch it. So what they did is a 3D scan, a color 3D scan of the entire model and detail scans done of certain parts of the model as well as actual artifacts. The goal being that as museum goers looked at the physical model in the museum, they could also bring out their iPad or their phone or smartphone or whatever and electronically move through the exhibit as well as look at and examine details of the exhibit in the kind of detail that you wouldn't be able to do even if you were right on top of it with a magnifying glass. Now, this isn't the only thing that the MPM has done. The Milwaukee Public Museum has a lot of other virtual displays as well. They've got two Egyptian mummies that have been part of their collection since 1887. So using the latest technology, visitors can now peer inside MPM's two Egyptian mummies through CT scan imagery. Now, all of this virtualization is leading us ever closer to something that we discussed on the show here a couple of years ago. At the time, we were looking at how 3D scanners were used to do a complete color 3D scan of the inside of entire buildings. And we're talking large buildings, cathedrals. Sometimes this was done for historical preservation, and other times for documenting the as-built structure of a plant, some sort of process plant, prior to retrofitting it, so they could map out where all the actual pipes and tanks and so forth actually were, not where the plan said they were. So this is great for retrofitting. Now, there's several companies that make 3D scanners for doing this, and I've seen the results of all of these scans, and they really are amazing. Now, at the time, I mentioned that I could foresee the day, and I still claim that we're not there yet, but I think we're getting closer, where you could do something like be in like a Google Street View, So you're wandering around, it's Google Street View. I don't know if you've ever done that, it's pretty fun. Walk down a street, look at all the buildings. You could come up to a building, you could click on the door of the building, and then go inside that building. Now what would you have? Well, you would switch to a color 3D scan of the entire interior of that building. And maybe that building is what? It's a museum. And you could, within that virtual reality of that 3D scan of the museum, you could walk up to a display, let's say King Tut, walk around it, and then using the type of technology supplied by Creaform and others, to scan that model, you could go inside the model. So you'd be inside a virtual reality, inside a virtual reality, inside a virtual reality, without leaving your house. Imagine being able to tour museums or historical sites that you might never see in your entire life. Not just the Milwaukee Public Museum, as awesome as that place is, but how about the Louvre? How about the Vatican Museum? How about the Smithsonian Museums or Notre Dame? You could go anywhere. I mean, wouldn't that be crazy? Just an armchair tourist, indeed, purely virtual. I love it. We're getting there. We're getting there. All right, that's my geek excitement for the day. Okay, well, speaking of large volume 3D metrology, we are happy to have with us via Skype today John Zeigert, professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering and Engineering Science at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, UNC Charlotte. John is involved in 2 projects that we believe tie into the future of manufacturing in the United States, particularly in terms of metrology and large volume manufacturing, making really big things with a lot of precision. First, John is one of the organizers of the Precision Path Consortium, which is an industry-driven group that works to identify and prioritize the technology needs of several industries, aerospace, defense, energy, other industries, that manufacture large-scale, high-accuracy parts and products. He is also involved in UNC Charlotte's Center for Precision Metrology, which is an interdisciplinary association of UNC Charlotte faculty and student researchers, and they are allied with industrial partners in looking at the research, development, and integration of precision metrology, again, really precise metrology as applied to manufacturing. So I guess you could say metrology and manufacturing is really John Zeigert's forte. And we are really happy to have him with us via Skype. Hello, John. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dirk. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, well, thanks, man. So, okay, let's talk a little bit first about Precision Path. We've talked about it on the show a few times. The purpose, as I understand it, of the Precision Path Consortium is to understand the future and challenges of high precision, large volume manufacturing. Do I have that basically right?
Yeah, that's correct. This is part of a larger federal government initiative that's been happening. Most people are aware that over the past 5 to 8 years, the federal government has sort of rediscovered the importance of manufacturing to our economy, and they're doing everything they can to stimulate it. They're funding a number of manufacturing innovation institutes. Your viewers may be familiar with the Additive Manufacturing Institute in Youngstown, Ohio was the first one. There's about 9 of them now. And they're planning another 10 to 15 more in various technology areas to catalyze industry groups to come together to think about perhaps proposing an institute. The government made some money available in a program called AMTech, Advanced Manufacturing Technology, and this was to have industry groups come together to develop technology roadmaps that are of interest to them. And some of those presumably will follow on by proposing some of these institutes. So yes, so this is part of a federal government initiative.
And can you just so people understand what we're talking about, what you're talking about when we talk about precision metrology within large volume manufacturing? Can you just give us maybe a couple of examples of what we mean?
Sure. So the theme that we're pursuing here, it really has to do with portable dimensional metrology equipment. I think most of our viewers are going to understand that there has been an absolute technology explosion of all different kinds of trackers and scanners and laser radars and so on and so forth that over the past 20 to 25 years have just introduced capabilities that never existed before. And this group of technologies has had a particularly profound effect on companies that make large-scale components and systems that still have to have high precision. Examples, of course, are aerospace, but energy, where they make generators and turbines for electric utilities, shipbuilding, heavy equipment construction, etc. The methods by which these things are being manufactured and assembled are quite different, and much of that has been enabled by these portable dimensional metrology systems.
Okay, now you're also involved what I think is a related program in some sense at UNC Charlotte, and that's the Center for Precision Metrology. What is CPM's goal exactly, if you can describe that?
I would say actually Center for Precision Metrology is my main research affiliation here. About 25 years ago, some of your listeners may recognize the name Dr. Bob Hawken. He was at NIST for a long time. He was a driver of the standards for characterizing accuracy of CNC machine tools, the B554, B557. He's also a co-inventor of the laser tracker along with Cam Lau of API. He came to UNC Charlotte and started this center, and it's been in existence now for about 25 years. It is the largest group of faculty researchers that are focused on all kinds of dimensional and surface metrology that I'm certainly in the U.S. and one of the very largest in the world.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Particularly this year, there's a lot of talk about the state of manufacturing in the United States, and this is mostly centered around jobs, but there's some discussion, let's say, about the skills gap as well. So do these two programs, do you think, the Precision Path Consortium and the Center for Precision Manufacturing, do these programs tie into that discussion in some way?
Well, certainly, Precision Path Consortium is about letting industry people who might never talk to each other come together, understand the joint challenges, the common challenges they have, and try to prioritize those so that they can make intelligent decisions about what they're going to be able to do at what point in time in the future. And of course, the challenges they face, workforce and skills gap are certainly part of that, but there are many other challenges, software compatibility, data management, etc. Understanding what the actual capability of these new instruments are, what kind of traceable uncertainty you might have. So there's a whole host of challenges there. At the university, the Center for Precision Metrology, we're more involved there with research that advances metrology, that develops new capabilities, new instruments, new algorithms, etc.
So both of these together, it sounds like, in a sense, they're very forward-looking in trying to look down the road toward where manufacturing is going, where metrology is going, so that we're prepared for what comes. We're not caught off guard by having to manufacture things that we can't measure, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So at the Precision Path Consortium, it really is about understanding what industry needs in order to be able to remain competitive in a global marketplace. Speaking with one voice, so that the instrument suppliers and developers, the researchers like myself and my colleagues at UNC Charlotte, know we're working on the right things that will have high impact in industry and will enable us to continue to be competitive with the rest of the world.
Now, the Precision Path Consortium put out a survey, I think it was a month or a couple months ago. Tell us a little bit about that, and what kind of information have you collected from that survey, and is there anything you can tell us about what you've learned so far?
So one of the first stages in information gathering was to, it's kind of a blunt instrument, but a survey that industry professionals can access. And we're basically asking fairly generic questions about what are the kinds of things that you do with portable dimensional metrology equipment. We call them usage scenarios or use cases. Things all the way from alignment of components during assembly to checking for dimensional conformity to prints, etc. And so there's that part of it. And we're also, the second part of the survey asks about the various technology families. So we identified about 8 or 9 generic families of portable dimensional measurement equipment, and we're asking people what their understanding of the current state of the attributes, accuracy, ease of use, etc., are, and what they need for those to be in the future. And so we're trying to just get a general sense of where the big drivers are for change and demand for change, and what people are expecting. And then over the next year, we will have working groups of experts who will be trying to distill that information and much more to develop these roadmaps that show where all these technologies are moving as we go forward.
All right. Well, John Zeigert, professor of mechanical engineering, University of University of North Carolina in Charlotte. Thanks for joining us this morning. By the way, if people are interested in Precision Path, what's the website for that?
It is precisionpathconsortium.com.
Okay.
It's all one word. And this consortium is actually being run by the Coordinate Metrology Society. So it will become a standing subcommittee of CMS. And so you can get to us either through the CMS website or just directly precisionpathconsortium.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, John, for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So, if you, as we said, if you want more information, you can go out to the CMSC. That's cmsc.org, or the precisionpathconsortium.com, and get more information on everything that John was talking about there. All right. So, note to everyone: if you read any article this week, read "Leaders Who Listen Control the Conversation" by Marlene Chisholm. And I don't care if you are a CEO, an assembly worker, a janitor, or an engineer. Maybe especially an engineer, this article is important. And it's all about listening. Chisholm's focus is how proper listening makes you a better leader, a stronger leader. But really, proper listening makes you a better employee in general, a better person, actually. And honestly, listening isn't easy. It's not just about hearing. Listening means processing. It means giving the other person space to say their piece. And Chisholm puts it like this. She says, when someone shares any opinion, listening requires you to simply focus on the other person and see things for one moment from their point of view. Allow space, count to 10, breathe, absorb. Avoid the tendency to add value, start a debate, take it personally, or jump in with statistics just to show how smart you are. She makes these 7 points. She says there's 7 things that you do not want to do when you are listening. We'll go through them real quickly here. You do not want to argue the point. You do not want to jump to a conclusion. You don't want to, believe it or not, add value. You don't want to take it personally or place blame. You don't want to jump in with facts to support your opinion. And of course, you don't want to judge the other person. Now, some of these are just common sense. I mean, if you've got half a brain and any feelings at all, you understand that don't take it personally, don't judge, don't place blame. We all understand that it's good to avoid the emotional knee-jerk reactions we experience when someone shares an opinion or an experience or an idea. We know that it's just best that we just continue to listen and keep those thoughts and reactions to ourselves. But it isn't just reacting to ideas that we disagree with. When we agree with speakers, we may still be inclined not to listen. For instance, any engineers out there? Hello, engineer. How about Chisholm's exhortation to try not to add value? And engineers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've ever sat in on engineers discussing something, we all want to add value. We all want to contribute to an idea, to an innovation. And when we're all just a bunch of engineers standing around BSing, maybe that's okay because we're all engineers. We understand that's how we communicate, and it's okay when you're a bunch of engineers doing that. But when you, as an engineer, for instance, try to add value to topics that are not engineering oriented, or more important, discussions with non-engineers, it might be better just to shut up and listen. Not everybody needs to hear how brilliant your idea is or how to make it better. Engineers, ask your spouses if this isn't true. It's not always, I'm laughing, it's not always about trying to solve, this just cracks me up. It's not about always trying to solve the other person's problem. I don't know how many times my wife has told me that. Sometimes listening is just letting that person know that you understand. And the key thing is that you listen. Not listen and think ahead to what you're going to say once that person starts jibber-jabbering, but listen to the whole thing. Where is that person coming from? Are they upset? Do any of their points make sense or have any validity? That is what you should be listening for. They might ask, why should I do this? Why should I listen better? Well, first, it's polite. You want to be listened to, right? So give people the same respect. But Chisholm says there's a bigger reason. Chisholm says this, quote, leaders who really listen decide the outcome of the conversation. Decide the outcome of the conversation. Ask yourself this, how do you want this conversation to end? Where do you want to end up? For instance, do you want to leave the topic under discussion open for further exploration, or do you want to so tick off the other person that they will never bring it up again? Well, if it's business related, you really want the former. Do you want the person to trust you or not trust you? Listening and trying to understand builds trust, which means you can get to the actual problem solving later. So listen. Do you want the person to consider your position? Well, the first step is that you fully understand their position, and you have to listen to do that. And in fact, this is a key point. Even if you disagree with someone, you will never, ever accomplish anything with them unless you understand where they are coming from. And Chisholm says this, quote, listening is not necessarily about agreeing. Listening is about acknowledging the emotion so that the other person feels understood. Now, it takes practice, but in the end, as you learn to listen, you will become not just a better leader, but trust me, a better person. Good stuff from Chisholm. I really, she has a lot more to say. I encourage you to go out there and read it. It's really, I think it's one of those important things to take to heart, not only just in business, but I think just life in general. All right, let's move on to Deming's 14 points. Applying Deming's 14 points to innovation was the subject of Barbara Cleary's article this week, Deming's 14 points, innovation as an outcome. Cleary rightly points out that given our usual daily tasks at work, we barely have time to develop new and better approaches to changing requirements or needs or markets. Staying ahead of the curve sounds like it might demand working longer hours or hiring more people or cloning yourself, none of which seems likely in the short term, says Cleary. So how does one manage to innovate in this environment? Particular problem for small companies. Well, if we continually ask ourselves how our processes can be better, our organizations will find that innovation comes naturally. Looking at processes this way is at the heart of improvement as well as innovation, says Cleary, and that makes sense, right? Think of Ono's circle. If you look at your process long enough, just stand there and look at it and listen, you see both its strengths and its weaknesses. And as you look for ways to make it better and to capitalize on its strengths, innovation is going to appear. Creative ideas, for the most part, do not come out of thin air. They are generally a synthesis of what we know and observe, and we build upon our own experience and observation. So how do we get to that mindset? Is there a roadmap? Well, as the article points out, you could look to Deming. Deming's 14 points. Generally seen as keys to product and process improvement, Deming's 14 points also reflect the process for innovation. And so what Cleary does in this article is she looks at it, all of Deming's 14 points and then tries to illustrate how those could be used for innovation as well. And we'll just take a look at a couple of them. So for instance, Deming's point number 1, create constancy of purpose toward improvement of products and services, allocating resources with the aim to stay competitive, to stay in business, and to provide jobs. So the question is, what is your purpose? Well, hopefully it is to meet your customers' needs, right? Which means you have to have a long-term view. You have to be looking at trends. You have to understand what your customers might be doing in the future and how your current products and processes will fit into that future need. Deming's point number 1 means you have to be looking down the road. Cleary writes, innovation demands that organizations that know how to meet customer needs respond to changing requirements, which means you might have to give up your traditional way of doing things in order to stay true to your purpose. Constancy, right? In giving your customers what they need. So, let's take a look at another point, Deming's point number 4. End the practice of awarding business on the basis of price tag. Instead, minimize total cost, move toward a single supplier for any one item on a long-term relationship of loyalty and trust. So this has been talked about ad nauseum, but there is a problem with awarding business on price tag alone. And part of that is that you often get what you pay for, right? And that what you get often comes with a lot of problems and a lot of fixes, a lot of firefighting, a lot of bickering with the vendor. We've all been there, and we waste a lot of energy and time and money trying to support this low-cost decision. If instead we develop relationships, some of the burden of improving processes is done for us by, believe it or not, our partners, which frees us up resources for innovation. You can ask, well, how does that work? Well, in any relationship, you want the other person to like you, right? I mean, that's part of what relationships are built on. It's mutual trust, mutual friendship, believe it or not. And that's no different for vendors. Having a cutthroat relationship with your vendor does not set up a situation where that vendor is going to do you any favors. They're going to abide to the absolute strictest letter of the law. And very honestly, very often you're not going to get what you really expect out of that partnership. Good relationships mean we look for ways to improve our processes and their processes because we're partners. And what happens? Well, because what floats their boat floats our boat as well, right? And they are doing the same for us. As we help each other within the context of a vendor relationship, you expose innovations and opportunities for improvement for each other. Finally, I'll go through this real quick. Deming point 6, institute training on the job. Okay, now you might think you can mark this off your list because you train all of your employees, but what Cleary says here is that it's not important just to train people to do their job. You have to teach them and train them the overall picture of the company. Employees must have continual support for learning about process monitoring and improvement and for understanding the larger system which they are a part into which they contribute, says Cleary. How can employees come up with fresh ideas if they don't understand the context in which they work? Okay, so those are just a few of the Deming's 14 points that Cleary has looked at from an innovation perspective. I invite you to read the article and look at the rest of them. The link to that article is just below the player page right down there or over there, depending where you're at. All right, now it's time for the tweet of the week. Silly, profound, and strange tweets that we come across every week, other than the ones that we see from the political candidates. Okay, this week's tweet of the week comes from Gurbash Chahal, who tweets, "If you genuinely want something, don't wait for it. Teach yourself to be impatient." I like that. All right, well, that is our show for this week, but before we go, we want to thank our sponsor. Mitutoyo Corporation is the world's largest provider of measurement and inspection solutions, offering the most complete selections of machines, sensors, systems, and services, with a line encompassing CMMs, vision, form, and finish measuring machines, as well as precision tools and instruments and metrology data management software. Mitutoyo's nationwide network of metrology centers and support operations provides application, calibration, service, repair, and educational programs to ensure that their more than 6,000 metrology products will deliver measurement solutions for their customers. For more information, visit mitutoyo.com or click on the banner ad below or to the right of this video player. All right, so thanks to all of you for joining us this week. Thanks to John Zeigert of UNC Charlotte for joining us as well. Mike, hope you're having a great vacation. So long to all of you, and you all have a great weekend. So long.